I know Luvo is all about healthy living. What is the ideal cheat day for Christine Day? Lay it on us, because we all crack at some point.
It's like, so for me, it's got to be that Friday hamburger that I'll allow myself once a month, and to go the whole thing with French fries and just do it.
You got a favorite go-to spot for a good burger?
Oh, that's a secret.
Oh, now you hold back a little bit. That's the hook. Leave us wanting more, right? She's in the business of building brands, the one and only Christine Day. Welcome to Every Conversation Counts.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here.
You know, it's great to have you here. It's great to see the brands you have been behind when we look at Starbucks, Lululemon, and now Luvo. If there was anyone to ask about leadership, no doubt it's you. And from what you've seen, what you've experienced over the years, what is it that makes a leader effective?
I think it's a few things. I think it's seeing people. I think it's being able to create a compelling vision and purpose that people belong to. And it's about, I think, being the hero and also about being the servant. And I think leadership's a bit of a paradox in that way. So
no, that's interesting. Hero and the servant. How do you establish that presence of being a hero when you look at being a leader?
I think it's particularly important for women to understand that you actually have to get on the stage, that you have to lead, that you have to have that presence that people want to belong to. And at the same time, leadership is not all about you, because what you're actually leading is the contribution of others against a purpose. And so you have to create the space for them to perform. You have to create an environment where you're eliminating the barriers, you're allowing them to be their best self to contribute to the purpose of the organization.
And as you allow others to shine, no doubt there's going to be highs, there will be some lows. What do you struggle with in terms of a leader, even at this point, given all of your experience?
I think it's always seeing yourself as the ember to other people's flame, but you know, one of, I think, the characteristics of leaders is you're super responsible, and you want to create action, you want to solve problems. So sometimes it's letting people be in the struggle and letting them stay in it long enough so that they actually get out the other side and become good at the craft that you're asking them to be good at. And I think I shared with you, I learned that lesson from watching my young son become a pitcher in baseball. And I know if I had been that coach, I couldn't have stuck through 5 innings of watching somebody walk players. But the magic was in the the 5th, 6th inning, all of a sudden he hit his stride and he became a pitcher. And it made me reflect on really what it takes to be good at a craft, and sometimes it's in the struggle and people own it, and then their confidence comes from overcoming the struggle. And I think as leaders, we have to not only celebrate successes, but we also have to help people through that struggle and understand that's how people own being good at their craft and create the space for that.
And just watch the results kind of unfold. And you've had plenty of results and outcomes over the years. One of the things that stood out in interviews I've seen is that you talk about creating outcomes and creating the space for others to perform. What's the key question you ask when you're choosing whether or not you want to work with someone?
I think one of the things I ask and I listen carefully for is what do you want to contribute? Right? Because a lot of people want something, and it's a one-handed thing about, like, they want their career, they want this next job title, they want something, right? They want money. But what's more important is what is it that you have to contribute? And if that's what's driving you as contribution, you've got someone who's working for something, not to give, as opposed to something to get.
And what's that key contribution that you've come to respect over the years?
I think for me, it's the contribution of making a difference, right? So you're doing something that's purpose-led, that's bigger than just yourself and what you need and or want as an object. It's if you're working for purpose.
Purpose is, really falls in line with the message of vision, which we've heard that you are, a big proponent of. But there's also the idea of impression management. Someone is coming in, they're trying to impress you, maybe they're trying to get into Luvo, but this idea of impression management, what is it that stands out when you meet someone for the very first time that impresses you the most?
I think it's humility and gratitude, and it's, do they say please and thank you? Are they actually aware of the other people around them? So if you went to dinner with Howard Schultz, you'd notice that he acknowledges everybody at every step in the restaurant of who's there with him. Howard Bihar, who was another of my mentors, picks up the cigarette butts and cleans the condiment stand. To this day, I can't leave a Starbucks without cleaning the bathroom for the staff and or making sure the milk crafts are full. So it's that both love of the game and passion, like are they really in it, and do they have the humility to be grateful and appreciative of other people around them? And when I see that in a person, I'm impressed.
And I mean, I hear that gesture and I think about the nature of inclusiveness, about building a culture, building loyalty. And when we look at your career path, the highs, the lows, I'm sure there's some difficult conversations along the way. What would you say is the toughest professional conversation you ever faced?
Well, boy, I can think of a lot. But I think, starting early in my career, in an entrepreneurial company, in the beginning, there's a lot of just heroics and muscle and effort and passion that goes into things. And you can get a lot done because you're inspired. But there comes a point where you actually have to start, the organization becomes complex, and you have to start planning for that success and having a strategy, and you have to manage multiple things to come together. And when Starbucks hit that point, I had my biggest probably moment of failure, because I was leading store development at the time, and we had to go from 15 stores to go to 50 stores, and we did 15 stores again, right? We didn't make any progress because we were still doing things the same way. So I actually had to change my leadership from doing to creating a strategy and planning and building the whole team in a more structured way of success. So it really changed my leadership and what was needed for the scale, and how I worked with team members and how I created organizational success. And if I hadn't learned that lesson, and if I hadn't failed and gotten the 15 and I got put on an action plan, so that's basically you're going to get fired, right? So, and the hardest part of that conversation was that I'd let people down, and I had to earn back my credibility. And so, sometimes that's the hardest part of failure, isn't that you failed, it's that you lost credibility. And so I think that was one of the toughest conversations, and pulling myself back up from that I had to both, be a part of, and then have a conversation with myself to get out of.
And what do you credit to rising up? Because that's no easy feat to describe, that feeling like you have lost respect, you have lost credibility, but something's got to come from within. What do you credit to the success of being able to bounce back?
A good mentor of mine said to me, when you fail, all as you can do is admit it, fix it, and don't repeat it. And I think that was really good advice. And, failure and problems are what happen in business. And, the reality is it might have just been a good try, and it might have been not all the right people, and or it might have been not the right effort in quite the right way. It could have been a failure in partners that you work with. And you have to be as willing to lead in the good times as the bad times. And you can't create fear. And, all you can do is focus on solving the problem and understanding what went wrong and fixing it and moving forward. And that kind of resilience is what's needed to persist in business. And if you think about it, it's like an athlete. If you didn't try again the minute you lost a race, we wouldn't have any Olympians. You wouldn't try, to be a better pitcher. In my son's example, if you walked 4 people, if you didn't have that grit, that resilience, that determination to figure out how to get it done. And I think that's what carries you through failure. Well,
the resiliency to overcome the failure. You mentioned good times, some bad times, some challenging times. I think about an era in Lululemon. You're there, and sometimes there are other leaders that may say things that you disagree with. And Chip Wilson, front and center in the media. When I think about some of the statements he said, how do you approach someone where you may genuinely disagree with their stance, and you need to confront an issue, but you don't want to ruin the relationship? How do you navigate that awkward situation?
You have to do it without judgment, right? I mean, it comes down to the facts and the value and the impact, and having the tough conversation without judging the other person on the other end. Because what I find is people do things because they believe in them. They don't always understand or have the same awareness of the consequences of actions or things. They don't see things through the same lens, and particularly with creative people, that happens more often than not. Their filter is different. It's what makes them so great at what they do, and it can also make them so bad at what they do. And so understanding with compassion, but then there also comes a point where you have to say, this values doesn't meet my values, and who am I going to be in this? And I think you can't choose your success over your values. And when that moment comes, the most powerful choice you have is the choice to move on.
You are patient. You are patient, and I guess you got to be when you're a leader in your position, because with patience, with understanding, comes the value of trust. And when you're trying to build trust in an inclusive culture, what do you find are the most successful ways to achieve that?
It's being clear in that purpose and in that vision, which it always starts with for me. And then it's being clear in the outcomes that you want, right? What is it we're working for? What does success look like? And so painting that picture for people. And sometimes it can be, you know, a number, which is like, you know, success will come. All the things work for us in our business model if you know that it's $35,000 a week that we need to hit in sales. And so, you know, then people know, and they know how to gauge success for themselves, and they'll overcome the barrier. But it also success can't just be defined as a number. I think one of the worst times at Starbucks was when we defined success as 2,000 stores by the year 2000. Well, that's not really inspiring, right? It's like, what were we doing with 2,000 stores? And it actually was more inspiring when we said, it's not 300 stores, it's one store 300 times, right? So it's even how you coach the messaging and how you inspire people with what you bring together for outcomes. And then it's making sure that everybody understands how they're contributing to that success. And, you know, I really hate it when people get in boxes of this is my job versus that job. It's like, what needs to be done? And it's kind of like slide deployment in essence, where sometimes I have to be a little more operational and other times I have to be a little more out front. But I can slide to both of those positions because I know the game and I know what needs to get done. And if I look at the team that I have, what is my value in contributing? And sometimes it's a little more hands-on and sometimes it's a little more hands-off. And I think when everybody looks at their position as supporting the team and not mine, you get a powerful team.
Well, that versatility, I think, could speak to the wonders you've done with brands. We mentioned right off the top, we're talking about the business of brands. You have an expert eye of seeing an expanding company and turning it into a perpetual profit machine. What are those key indicators you always look at to decide, yes, I'm going to invest in this idea, I'm going to invest in this company?
I think it starts with me in the marketplace about, is there a consumer need? Is there something that's happening in society that is creating this compelling need? And then does the product satisfy that need? So, you know, to give the example, even at Starbucks, what Howard always said is we are in the people business serving coffee. And it was the third place experience that he was creating in a world that was really moving towards technology. So the disruption was actually having a place where people had community, and through, you know, the ability to control their coffee, just that, you know, where you can have that double tall, extra hot, half sweet, no whip mocha, right? So you can have that everywhere.
You've got a favorite, clearly.
No, that's not mine.
That's not yours, okay.
That might be a customer's, but bringing that together in a place where there was community and a little bit of humanity in what was becoming a very technology-focused world. So there was purpose, there was need, there was disruption because coffee was highly commoditized. When you look at what happened at Lululemon, it was really bringing beauty and the retailing experience to what was really a uniform business called women's athletics. But it also was done with the yoga mindset, and so a more kind of spiritual, wanting to belong to something that was greater and being of service. So bringing the yoga mindset together with the retailing beauty and beauty of retailing into athleticism, you were being disruptive. And so I saw how those captivate. And at Luvo, it's really the need for healthy food and this nutrition message that doesn't exist in either the conventional or the natural channel. And when I walk an aisle and see 200 products that could be reinvented, you know you've got a business. And how you know that you're creating something that matters is, you know, are your target customers, the avatar customers, adopting and sharing the story of your brand? If you have to buy the clicks and the likes, you probably don't have loyal customers. You have active marketing dollars. When you can actually build your social and digital and your connection to the consumers in a shared, what I call a shared experience way, they're actually building your brand with their voice. And if you measure the loyal fans and you don't pollute it with all these buy clicks and likes, you actually know if you're creating something that matters. And so that's the other thing that I look at, are people engaged in it with a way that matters.
The authentic engagement, I think, is key for anybody building a brand. And I guess the how behind it is fascinating when you're asking people to buy into change, buy into something new, something unfamiliar. And with the health and wellness trend, that's what you're doing with Luvo. But how do you overall successfully get people to buy into change?
I think it comes back to that purpose and vision and becoming part of their lives. And we don't put on the Luvo website, buy me, or here's just all my product. What we do is we create content that matters for people who are looking for that answer. And so when you are that trusted content provider and having all these other third parties of data and stories and information that you're pulling for the person who's looking for these answers, then they'll see that your product is actually the answer that they're looking for. And so it's being that answer that creates the marketplace for your product is the real secret to creating that engagement and the perpetual market that businesses need to look at. Because if you're just marketing and doing clicks, it's shallow and people will switch. What you want to create is loyalty and a sense of connection that's bigger than your product itself.
Connection. It's one of the big reasons we're here today. And when we talk about connection and conversation, I love to get into the mindset of our subjects to talk about that one conversation that stands out, that defined or perhaps redefined your life, your journey. What stands out for you for your most important conversation?
I think the most important conversation, there's so many I could give examples of, but I think it's the one where when I was struggling with my own leadership and I didn't understand the difference between the hero leader and the servant leader, and what was missing in my leadership to be compelling to others. And I had a mentor who said to me, wouldn't it be a shame if the best golfer ended up being the best caddy? And I was so busy handing the golf clubs to everybody else, I didn't realize I needed to actually get in the game beyond the stage and be the inspiration myself. And so when the person said it to me that clearly, that I wasn't actually playing as big as I could be, that I took responsibility for that and got in the game.
And when you look at the game now of all these people that you meet on a regular basis, what would you say you do to effectively make every conversation count?
Be present. I think it's so important to actually be with the person that you're with in that moment. And so often we're in the future, or we're in worry, or we're in concern that we're not listening. And I think as a leader, every moment does count. If I walk through the office distracted by what's in my head, the person who I just passed and didn't say hello to thinks they're not important. Or if I'm busy when I'm talking to you, listening to my phone or checking it, then I'm not present and people think I'm not listening. So I'm not creating a conversation where this conversation matters. And so what I'm really careful about is being present and that this conversation matters.
And I appreciate the sentiment. One, investing the time, two, sharing the insight. And when you look at business as a whole, what's perhaps one thing that you once believed about business and people that is no longer true from what you've learned?
I think on the business side first, I think it's a myth that every business has to be commoditized as it gets bigger. I think the markets that you play in, you might have some commodity markets, but it doesn't mean your brand has to be. And I look at examples like Nike or Apple or Chanel bags. So you have plenty of companies that have grown big that didn't commoditize. And I think in school we're taught there's a commoditization curve, and so I don't believe that anymore. I think you can create value at every level while still having a premium brand. And I think from people, what I've learned is that people are contribution machines, and it's not about telling them what to do, which I think a lot of leadership, talks about in more that control aspect. It's inspiring them to contribute, and so I think that's really what I've learned that's different than what I was taught.
Hey, it's Riaz. Thanks for watching. For more conversations, click on subscribe and check us out online at everyconversationcounts.com.